Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Wake Up Well. It is Sunday, the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, and I'm coming to you from a very sort of chilly Hillsborough. It's like -1 outside, I think, but the sun is out. It's beautiful. But yes, I wanted to unpack a little book this morning. You might have seen from last week's live stream, Duncan started and kicked off our brand new series, Big Messages, Little Books. And it's my privilege to unpack the book of Jude this morning. We're going to be doing this throughout the week of Wake Up Wells. Actually, I'll be speaking on the book of Jude on this morning's live stream as well. But I just wanted to kind of lay out some context for our community resources, and just to give a little bit of history around the book of Jude, its authorship, who this man was, and why, most importantly, was he writing. And what is the message that he has to say, not only at that time in history, but also to us today? How can we deep dive and really grab out the gold that the scriptures would want to say to us today? So let's get into it. So who wrote the book? First and foremost, like most of the other general epistles, the title of this little book takes its name from its author. Most scholars readily identify the writer as Jude, the half-brother of Jesus, for two main reasons. First, he identified himself as the brother of James in Jude 1, verse 1, meaning that he was not the apostle named Jude, a man who was called the son of James in Luke 6. And the author of this book identifies himself as the brother of James, and that likely aligns him with the family of Jesus. Secondly, in Matthew chapter 13, it records the names of the brothers of Jesus as James and Judas, whereas the Gospels record his name as Judas. English translations shorten it to Jude, probably for the same reason that nobody would really perhaps want to call their child Judas today, because of its association with Judas Iscariot, the disciple who betrayed Jesus. But like his older brother, James, Jude did not place his faith in Jesus while Jesus was alive. Only after the crucifixion and the resurrection did sort of the scales fall from Jude's eyes, and did he then become a follower of his half-brother Jesus. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, it offers a very interesting piece of information to us, noting that the Lord's brothers and their wives took missionary journeys. And from this sort of very vague portrait, we can sort of begin to picture Jude as a man who lived in skepticism for a time, but eventually came to a powerful and personal relationship with Jesus himself. So where are we in history? Now, the book of Jude is very notorious in terms of notoriously difficult to sort of date, primarily because the Bible and tradition reveals so little about the personal details of the author, whilst the book itself really refrains from naming any particular individuals or places or even events happening at the time. One clue that we have as present-day readers is the striking similarity of the book of Jude and 2 Peter. Now, using the textual criticism method, assuming Peter wrote this letter, his second epistle, in sort of AD 64 to 66, Jude probably was writing around the same time, somewhere between sort of 67 and 80 would be a sort of a general kind of ballpark kind of date. So why is Jude so important? Why this book? Why are we looking at this book in particular? Jude's sort of very edgy brevity communicates a sort of sense of urgency, of this notion that false teachers were infiltrating the church's theology at the time, and they needed to be sort of very outrightly condemned and removed from the church. Few words meant that Jude, in terms of a very short book, Jude would not waste kind of sort of space and time dancing around this issue. He saw within the church people and practices that were really worthy of condemnation, including rejecting authority and seeking to please themselves. In response to these errors, Jude marshaled much biblical imagery to make clear what he thought about it all. Anything from Cain killing his brother Abel to the punishment of the people who populated Sodom and Gomorrah. Very vivid imagery that people would readily identify in that culture. So what's the big idea about this book? What's the kind of main thrust that he gets to? Jude's purpose in writing this letter was kind of twofold. He wanted to expose these false teachers that had infiltrated the Christian community. Scholars identified that as Gnosticism or Gnostics or spiritual sort of learners. And he wanted to also encourage Christians to stand firm in their faith and fight for the truth. That's the key. Jude recognized that the false teachers often peddled their wares unnoticed by the faithful. They were good at infiltrating people's thinking and being among them. So he worked to sort of heighten the awareness of the believers by describing in vivid detail how terrible sort of dissenters they really were. But more than sort of just raising awareness of the issue, Jude thought it was important that the believers stand against those working against Jesus Christ and his church. Believers were to do this by remembering the teaching that the apostles had taught them and building each other up in faith, praying in the Holy Spirit and keeping themselves in the love of God. That's a really key point about this book. So the application is really interesting. These are my thoughts. I think he's saying fight for the truth. Fight for what you know to be true, what the apostles had taught them. Stand up against errors in the church, errors of false teaching. The book of Jude is the very definition of sort of like very punchy and pithy proclamations with its short commands and statements popping off the page. In our day and age, this might seem as, kind of rude or unacceptable or a bit arrogant, but in many circles, the forcefulness of Jude will not be tolerated. Crowds maybe, or people preferring a gentler kind of admission. But Jude reminds us that there is a time and a place for the aggressive protection of faith from those that would seek to tear it down. But I hope you enjoy exploring it this week. I hope that the Holy Spirit really speaks to you in this and with your communities as well. So bless you all. Have a great week.